Well, thank you very much for coming out on this rainy Thursday. And thank you very much to Christine and to Larry for inviting me to the center. For more than half a century, conservative critics housed in think tanks, foundations, and the media have championed the cause of conservative college students who they say suffer on college campuses. In books with such titles as Free Fall of the American University and Tenured Radicals, critics charge that the American higher education has become the playpen of liberal, if not radical, faculty, and that in the classrooms of the politicized university, middle-of-the-road students complacently consume their professors' misinformation. Moderate students are smug in feeling, liberal students are smug in feeling that they're on the righteous side of politics, and conservative students have to decide whether to endure their professors' tirades quietly or voice their outrage, running the risk of sacrificing their grades. Now, to mitigate the effects of the leftist campus, well-funded conservative organizations have been put in place. David Horowitz, for instance, has introduced the Academic Bill of Rights to legally protect students from liberal orthodoxy, while others like the Young America's Foundation sponsor conferences that introduce thousands of students on the right to celebrities in the movement. The Claire Booth Luce Policy Institute is targeted to college women, while intellectual organizations like the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, started by William F. Buckley, or the Federalist Society, or the Institute for Humane Studies at George Mason University, provide internships and seminars for budding conservative academics and future jurists. And the list goes on with the support of foundations with many familiar names, Scaife, Olin, Koch, and so forth. Yet while this movement to build a core of young, ideological, dependable lawyers, journalists, congressional staff, and voters has been a central priority of the right, very few social scientists have studied the effort to mobilize these students or to examine just how these students experienced their undergraduate lives in the first place. And this has left us in the odd situation of not knowing if the accusations leveled against universities resonate with the students on whose behalf they're made, nor do we know much of anything else about these students, such as when and how do they become conservative? What are their political turning points, both before and during college? What are the issues that they care about, and how do these differ from their elders, if they do? Who do conservative students know in the larger world of conservative thought and politics? How are their networks formed? And we've also been more or less in the dark, except for a few media reports, about how students on the right actually enact their conservatism on campus. What kinds of speech and action do they use? From what repertoire do they select? And just how does conservative speech and action vary from campus to campus, if at all? In the absence of good social science research on these questions, one could have a general sense that conservative college students are a fairly homogeneous bunch who more or less mimic what the national GOP does, but is it true? And this is where my co-author, Kate Wood, and I come in. I apologize for the extremely crowded slide on the board, but I'm interested in having you understand our conceptual framework. And we come in with our book, Becoming Right, which is a comparative case study of two universities. In choosing to study conservative students at Eastern Elite Private University and Western Flagship Public University, our idea was to see if we could get better purchase on how universities might be understood to uniquely shape students' politics. Sociologists and other social scientists have long been interested in universities' effects on students' political attitudes, their behaviors, their values, but the bulk of this research, known as political socialization or college effects research, uses national or campus-level data sets based on surveys to measure whether students change in their political participation rates, like voting, whether that increases or decreases because of college. Or it measures if college modifies students' political orientations one way or another, from conservative to liberal, say. But by my estimation, as important as this work is, it's also a rather thin way of thinking about students' political development, or how they actually experience politics during their college years. What the political socialization literature can't do, it wasn't designed to do it, either theoretically or methodologically, is consider the multiple ways that college campuses as interactional settings among lots of different people on campus, which are made up of distinctive organizational features, housing, class size, student to faculty ratios, as well as cultural understandings of who we are on this campus as a campus community. How it is that these campus features might give meaning to and shape young people's political ideas and action. So by using qualitative methods, in particular in-depth interviews, also fieldwork on these campuses and also at conferences and in conservative organizations, we wanted to see if and how universities play a significant role in fundamentally constituting new political ideas and discovering new models for action in one's conservative behavior. Now, Kate and I, very fortunately, aren't alone in how we think college campuses should be understood as generative systems of meaning rather than as repositories of previously formed individual level perspectives among students. So for those of you in the know about sociology of education, I don't know if there are any sociologists of education in the audience, but you won't be surprised to learn that we position our study on the same bookshelf as several recently published works, which show how universities act as hubs and incubators for particular types of students to flourish. So for example, Elizabeth Armstrong and Laura Hamilton, although they're not studying political formation, do look at how a public university in the Midwest is set up to facilitate what they call a party pathway. They have party dorms, they have a very ample fraternity network and so forth, and this creates the identities of partiers at this university. Seamus Khan and Ruben Gatsambide Fernandez in separate books look at how elite boarding schools manufacture in students particular models of self-confidence and a self of deservingness as they move on to college. And we're also informed by older work, as I've indicated above. And in particular, I'll draw your attention to Meyer, Bourdieu, and DiMaggio in their various studies of how higher education in different ways charter unique identities and lifestyle possibilities. And we're bringing politics to the mix. Now, on the conservative research end of things, there's also very fortunately, because we really need to learn a lot more about the politics of the right in our polarized society, as Larry mentioned, there's a new body of work that focuses not only on Christian or extremist conservatism, or conservatism among women, which is where most sociological attention to conservatism has been paid in the past, I would argue, but also on fiscal conservatism, on the infrastructure of conservatism, the think tanks, the foundations, the university centers, and on the historical advent of anti-establishment or movement conservatism, including excellent new projects on the Tea Party. And I've indicated a few of these educational and conservative research projects on the slide, but in the grand scheme, what I'm talking about today, as well as in the book, is bringing these research streams together to look at how university campuses and today's conservative politics intersect, and how college shapes the nature, the activities, and fundamentally the formation of politically conservative selves. So turning now from our conceptual framework to our data, I want to say a few words about our case study schools and our sample. Now, as I started thinking about this project in the summer of 2007, I had a whole bunch of case study campuses that I thought I might look at, as many as six at one time. That didn't prove feasible. I selected Eastern elite and Western public universities for comparison along dimensions of both similarity and difference, which is a classic case study selection methodology designed to yield insights you wouldn't get from a single case study. And I can tell you why. These two have been given pseudonyms later in Q&A if anybody's interested. Now, in terms of similarities, both are secular institutions, although Eastern Elite was a religious institution at its founding, but that was a long time ago. Both are Research One universities, meaning that they grant PhDs and that research is a primary focus of faculty and of graduate students. And politically, at least by reputation, both of these schools are in the conservative spotlight as liberal bastions. So if you listen to conservative AM radio